So at the top of this page, it's going to be all the formulas you need. Let's look at solving for the centroid. So the first thing we need is to find the midpoint. So we are trying to find the three medians, or the three lines, and what a median does is it intersects it connects the midpoint and the opposite vertex. So we need to first find what those midpoints are. So let's do it. All right, GI, well, actually, first we're going to write the points down. That would be helpful. All right, so for midpoint formula, if you're trying to find the midpoint of IG, you'd add -6 and -8 together, you get -14. Cut that in half, you get -7. So the X value for GI should be -7. The Y value for the midpoint of GI is -5 plus 0 is -5. Cut that in half, you're going to get -5 halves. Here's what I don't want on this project. Decimals, ever. No decimals, ever. So put it in simplified fractions always. Just keep it uniform. Always simplified fractions. So that point is actually right here. And then if you wanted to just count that on the graph and make sure that it's correct, I mean, you can kind of eyeball it and see, yeah, that makes sense. But also, if you count up 5 and over 2 and cut both of those numbers in half, so instead of going up 5, you go up 2.5 and you go over 1, then that's where that point is, which is the same as that midpoint formula. All right, and then just for time's sake, I'm going to write in the rest of these, and then we're going to plot them. But these are all the midpoints. You should know how to find midpoints. And then we're going to plot those on our triangle. Now that we have our midpoints, we need to draw the medians. It gives you an explanation of how to draw it. So it's helpful to, read this when you're doing the project. You get to use your notes on it. Draw 3 lines through the midpoints to the opposite vertex. What does that look like? Well, I'm just going to connect midpoint to opposite vertex, midpoint to opposite vertex, midpoint to opposite vertex. We also will need to label our triangles. So midpoint to opposite vertex. So you can take your ruler and you can do this 3 times. Oh, I had something under my paper. All right, and then if you draw it correctly, they should all intersect at the same point. That point is the centroid. So for the medians, the labels that are necessary are these markings. And if you don't remember what these markings are, it's on page 5 of your notes. Okay. All right, once you've labeled your triangle correctly, these are the 3 things that you'll need to find the equation of the line. You need the midpoint, the vertex, and the slope of the median. I'm just going to pick 2 of the points. -5 halves, -3, -5 halves, -8, -5. And then we need to figure out the slope of this median, right? All right, how do we find the slope of the median? I'm gonna show you both ways. We're gonna start and we're gonna plug these points in, the midpoint and the vertex. So the midpoint is the midpoint of IH, and then the opposite vertex is G. So like this one is G, and then this is like the midpoint of IH. So if that's helpful to write that down, you can do that. All right, let's put these in. -5 halves minus -5 and -3 minus -8. All right, so we can plug that into the calculator, and then we can also count this slope. So it goes up 2.5 and it goes over 5. So this should end up being 1/2 if we did it correctly. So that can kind of help us check our answers here. All right, here's my slope formula. I plugged the whole thing in. You get 1/2. Also, I got the same thing when I counted it. I would highly suggest doing both, because if one's not coming out to the other, you got to figure out, is my picture wrong? Like, what's the deal? So they should both equal 1/2 when you count that. And now you have your slope. Great. So I have my slope and my median, and now I just need to pick a point and plug it into y equals mx plus b form, and then I have my slope. So -5 equals 1/2 times -8 plus b. All right, we did this a lot in Unit 4. Here we are again. We're going to solve for b. All right, but I'm not going to... All right, when we solve for b, we get -1, so y equals 1/2 x minus 1. I have done one of these problems. Now, like on the project, you are going to have to find all 3 of those equations, but this shows you the process to find one. All right, we're counting some slopes here. So rise over run from G to I goes up 5/2. It is a positive slope. If we put Bob on that line, he's going up. IH, -5/6. I cannot tell you how many people mess this up and get, even though it's a negative slope, they put a positive slope for that. And then it's just ripple effect. The rest of their project's messed up because that slope's wrong. All right, and then also GH, make sure that you know GH is a horizontal slope. It is a slope of 0. Okay, GH is a slope of 0. Now we're going to make them perpendicular, because second step, find the slopes of these 3 lines. So that's what I just did. The 3 sides of the triangle, we found those 3 slopes. Make them perpendicular. Flip them, change the sign. So -2/5. +6/5. All right, perpendicular to 0. Who knows what that is? Undefined. All right, every single project is going to have at least one line where it's either a horizontal or a vertical line. You're going to have to know that perpendicular to 0 is undefined, perpendicular to undefined is 0. So here's my 3 midpoints. -7 and then go down 2.5. There's one. It's right in the middle of GI. And then this one goes -3, down 2.5. And this one goes -4, -5. Now we have our midpoint. All right, in order to draw these, it tells you what to do. I cannot tell you how many people get these mixed up, and they're like, oh, I'm doing the perpendicular bisectors, but y'all, not y'all, but I see them end up drawing them like the medians, or drawing them like the altitudes. No, it tells you what to do. If you have the circumcenter, you're working on the circumcenter, draw it like this. You're going to start with the midpoint, and you're going to use the perpendicular slopes. So I'm going to start with this midpoint, and I'm going to use this slope. All right, so GI is this line, but I want to draw a line perpendicular to that. Do I need the vertex for this at all? No, you do not. So start with this midpoint, and we are going to go down 2/5. Let's count. Starting with GI's midpoint. 1, 2. So you're in the middle of that line. That's okay. Down over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is, and then we're going to put a little dot there, and then we're going to connect that line. So my ruler's slipped while drawing this a couple times, so that's fun. But we're going to go for it. I think that's good. All right, we're going to do our markings on here. It's a perpendicular bisector, so it cuts this line in half, and it's perpendicular. Those are the labels that I'm looking for. So this line right here, even though it's really ugly because my ruler slipped, make sure you draw this in pencil when you do this. My perpendicular slope is -2/5, so it is going to go down, which that is correct. That's what we want. And then let's draw the rest of them. So this one right here, IH. Here's my midpoint, and then my perpendicular slope to IH is 6/5. So the problem with this is if you go up 6/5, you're off the graph. So how do we actually draw that? You won't have this issue on the project because you'll have a bigger graph. I just couldn't fit it on these notes. So in order to do this for here, I'm going to start by drawing this line first, because that one is just a vertical line and it's a lot easier to see. 1, 2, 3. And I'll go ahead and do my markings on here as well. And then this one should go through here. So this kind of gives me a gauge of, am I doing this correctly? But if it's up 6/5, which is the perpendicular slope to IH, then you know that it's going to come through like this way. And it should cross this line. You can also make both of those numbers negative. You can go down 6 and back 5, because 2 negatives make a positive. And it'll go the same way, but you may think, well, Ms. Kaufman, you're still off the graph, so how does this help? Well, if you only go half of that much, so down 3, 1, 2, 3, over 1, 2.5, that's the same as going down 6/5. But you will notice that it also goes perfectly through the intersection of the other 2 lines. So it works out. And then we have our 3 lines and our perpendicular bisect. This vertical line, we're not going to find the equation of it. It doesn't take any work. It's a vertical line. It's at x equals -4. If it was a horizontal line, it'd be y equals whatever level it's at. Okay? Let's write in the midpoint and the slope. All right, make sure you write in the rest of these things on your video. I added some stuff, so pause it, write these in. Now we're going to plug in our midpoint. The y value is -5/2. The slope is -2/5. And this is my perpendicular slope to this midpoint. X is -7 plus b. -5/2 equals +14/5 plus b. And then we're going to subtract 14/5 on both. All right. Is this an ugly number? Yes, it is an ugly number. But if you can utilize the calculator, as long as you type it in correctly, you'll be fine. So we're going to write this equation out. All right. So that is what your final equation looks like. We're going to fill, we already have the slopes and the perpendicular slopes, so we're just going to fill these in real quick. All right, we're going to read this. Draw lines through the opposite vertex that are perpendicular to the sides of the triangle. All right. So we're going to start at this opposite vertex. I'm going to start at G, and then I want to find the one that's perpendicular to G, or to IH. So we're going to use 6/5. Starting at G. If we go up 6 and over 5, we'll be off the graph, so I'm just going to do half that much. Up 3, over 2.5, and I'm going to draw that line. All right, and then we're going to start at H, and we're going to be perpendicular to this line. So instead of going down 2 and over 5, I'm actually going to go up 2 and back 5. And then I'm going to draw that line in. And then our last step is here, and then perpendicular, so you're just going to go straight down. And they should all go through the same point, which is the orthocenter. All right, one thing I want to point out, you're really only going to have to do the math for 2 of these, because one of these lines is x equals -6. This one. So we already have one equation. Let's find another one. On the project, you're going to have to find all 3, but we don't have time for that. So we have the perpendicular slope of GI. And then we have, nope, that's wrong. We have the perpendicular slope of IH. There we go. And then we have point G. So this is point G. This is the perpendicular slope of IH. If you know, it might be helpful to have that written in there for you. And then we're going to do y equals mx plus b. Ultimately, you are finding the equation of this line. Sometimes I have students that are trying to find the equations of the sides of the triangle, and that's not what you want at all. You want the equations of the altitudes. So -5 equals m times x plus b. All right, -5 equals, all right, we are going to multiply these things. So we're going to get -48/5. Yes. Yeah. So I went ahead and highlighted this to show you which line we're solving for. You're going to have to do all 3 lines on the actual project. So I'm going to cross out 13 because that's going to be confusing. And then we're going to add 48/5 on both sides. Got some ugly looking fractions here, but that's okay. We can type this into the calculator. So -5 plus 48/5. You're going to get 23/5. Is that difficult? No, it's not. You now have your b. Y equals 6/5x plus 23/5. And one thing I want to point out here, 23 divided by 5 is 4.6. Don't write 4.6. You'll write 23/5. But in order to, you know, kind of check your answer, you can always extend this line, because your graph will be bigger, to that y-intercept and see if this is anywhere near, like if your math matches your graph. That's a big, like an important thing for the project, making sure the math matches the graph. It'll just make your life easier. If it does, then you'll know it's correct.